Hello and welcome back to another episode of making a D&D journal. For this week's journal, I saw literally a single picture on the Pinterest and it detoured my entire previous plan for these next few pages. So what I saw was someone making like this 2D paper cut diorama thing in their journal, and I had to try it out for myself. So enjoy this video of me doing that and also running into a bunch of funky fresh roadblocks along the way. But before I get too ahead of myself, we've been following the party's venture into the lost fortress Caer Themar in search of the missing elven princess Dawnwyn. We've solved riddles, we've figured out puzzles, we've fought werewolves, and now we descend into the lower levels of the fortress into a dark room filled to the brim with necromantic magic. I know the setting looks a little different. I'm not working in my usual workspace, so look, it's my computer desk mat. Very cool. But I was just really tired. I was looking for any opportunity to be cozy and comfortable in the very little spare time that I had this week. So, you know, I brought all my stuff down, piled it up around me, and bundled up in my computer chair with a fluffy blanket like some craft gremlin goblin ghoul. Look, okay, crafting is not always beautiful and aesthetic. Sometimes it's just being a little guy in a fluffy blanket in a chair. Sometimes you gotta pick your battles. I won't lie, this first page is a little bit of a filler page. I needed to set up the situation for what I was trying to do, but it did give me a nice reason to keep practicing architectural drawings, which is something I told myself I would get better at and more patient with this year. And I do really like how this page turned out, even if it isn't necessarily crucial to the storyline. I do think it was an important part of setting the scene. So when we walked downstairs as a party, the rooms were still in ruins. There were collapsed archways and really sketchy stairs. We found ourselves peering into a large room that had walls and pillars positioned in such a way that it looked like it had been kind of like a courtyard, but instead of opening up into the sky, the room opened downward into what seemed like an endless pit. And before I continue on that very cool and creepy note, I realized something was wrong.
Oh no! I missed a page. Oh, didn't notice. What if I just cut it out? It's so good.
Since I was already kind of working on a page that felt like filler, I didn't really want to draw more drawings just for the sake of me making a mistake and missing pages. So I decided that I was going to cut out the background of the pillar page, be so brave, I had worked on it so carefully, and I was going to glue black construction paper behind it, and then glue that all together in a little page sandwich, effectively getting rid of both of the blank pages. But also in this process, I cracked the spine of my book off. It's just not attached anymore. So, you know, that was fun and neat and timely, and I really like that. I mean, it's not like I wasn't already thinking that I should make a new cover for the book, but I was kind of hoping that the book would at least stay intact for a little longer than this. But hey, that's life. I actually wanted to use some of my fancy textured papers with the gold embossing that I got in the last video, but I realized that the sheets were not big enough to fill the entire space that I had cut out, so black construction paper it is. That's all I had. I think the black still has a pretty cool effect, like the room is in darkness, which it was, so hey, it works out. Alright, on to page 2, the cultists. The first thing that we noticed inside of this courtyard-ish room were these short figures in black hooded robes. They were chanting in unison, and they all sort of encircled around the pit and one central leader figure who was standing on like a pillar and dais that rose out of the abyss, and one hand was holding a dark hammer with purple lightning encircling it, and the other was outstretched over a cauldron. I didn't draw my cultist with hammer because I was feeling brave, but not that brave, because I was afraid that if I, drew the hammer handle, and with how thin the pages in the books are, if I was gonna try and cut that out of the page, that I would just mess it up. I would just rip it off, and I probably would have. So we're just gonna give him hands that make him look like he's checking which direction is left and right. Hope y'all are okay with that. Not that I can do anything about it if you aren't. And then I began writing talking a little bit about all the things that I had in my notes, because this journal is not just a fun art project for me, it's also a great way for me to remind myself of the important things that have happened in this campaign. That way when I go to play a new session, I also have those fresh in my mind. I try to take a lot of notes, but the thing about note taking is that you have to remember that you took important notes and you have to make those connections while playing. And I think the visual and tactile aspects of making like this pretty journal definitely helps me with that. So to begin that layered diorama vibe, I approximated where about a third of the page would be and cut that line with my paper slidey cutting thing. I'm not sure what this tool is called, but it's really useful. I use that for most of the line, and then around the dwarven cultist and the cauldron I used an X-Acto knife and was just cutting on my cutting mat. So for the next layer in the diorama thing, I'm not sure if diorama is the right word for it, but you know what, we're this far into the video. Just to make sure things are lining up, I am technically starting a sketch on the 4th page instead of the 3rd page. I just wanted to figure out how much room I had and successfully depict the black obelisks behind the cultists. And so that way when the pages are flat, it looks like this pillar is kind of behind the guy in the robes. But then I move on to sketching and inking page 3. So before I continue describing the situation, let me tell you of the silly situation that happened within the situation. I'm not sure of the exact timeline of how this happened. I can't remember and I didn't take very good notes on it. Just somehow our half-orc fighter Roland turned into a pig. Mid-action is kind of, I guess, a hard time to take notes, but I believe at some point a cultist spotted him and used the polymorph spell on him and turned him into a pig. And the thing is, none of the characters in game actually saw it happen besides Roland. We were all kind of focused in different places around the room, and none of us ended up rolling to successfully make the connection that the pig was in fact Roland. So as a party, we just had to accept that our friend Roland had disappeared suddenly, and somehow a pig with red hair on top of his head, not unlike Roland's hair, had joined us. Also, Foxwise, our halfling ranger, who's very obsessed with petting every animal that she can find, named this mysterious pig Biscuit. Biscuit's a very formidable fighter. It's a shame that Roland didn't get to meet him, because Biscuit and Roland are so alike in so many unexpected ways. Returning back to page 4, we have the obelisks, the 5 black obelisks spread around the room, each one with a pile of bones at the bottom and purple lightning crackling up and down the sides. The rituals seem to be using these pillars as a conduit to siphon power, to turn what was once a holy place into a place that is desecrated, channeling this power towards cultist nefarious goals. And before we actually engaged as a group into combat and rolled for initiative, we were trying to sneak around the room and figure out if we could weaken or destroy the pillars before starting any actual violence. We kind of got the sense that the obelisks were making either the ritual or cultists or maybe just the leader guy stronger, and at this point we were pretty outnumbered in terms of bad guys to good guys, so we were carefully trying to restore the place by pouring holy water over anything that had been desecrated, which was basically everything, primarily focusing on the pillars. As a little Easter egg for mostly myself, I guess, I drew a little reference to a doodle that I had made while we were playing the session. So at some point Fing had crawled into a pile of skulls and bones to hide from a cultist that was walking in his direction, and inside of the pile in my journal I put a little thumbs up, and I think it's kind of cute because, you know, when you see these pages as a whole, you don't see the little thumbs up, you don't see Pig Roland, but then you turn the page and, you know, little thumbs up, there's a pig. It's just a little fun nod to the silliness of D&D as a whole. Sure, there are horrible darknesses and evil people, but also sometimes your friends turn into pigs and you end up in just all sorts of silly situations. The last page, of course, is the culmination of everything that these cultists were up to, what they were siphoning power for, where they were directing this power. The answer came to us in the form of resurrected bones, the bones of a long dead dragon. These were not just cultists, they were necromancers, and we were going to have to fight a dragon. Luckily, our efforts to weaken the resurrection spell by returning holy power to the obelisks worked. The dragon was not at his full strength, and we were able to defeat him in this weakened state, certainly not by our power alone. Strangely, we also heard voices voices, unsure of from where, but the voices encouraged us to continue the battle and gifted us strength that we did not have on our own. Extra spell slots, more empowered strikes, smites, and with the help of this mysterious force, we were able to defeat the enemy and also had a chance to interrogate some of these guys about what was going on. Upon closer examination of the individuals, we noticed their faces were scarred. Some of the scars even looked like it might have been in a language that we didn't understand. We were told that he who craves, he who thirsts, had sent them to take over Caer Themar. They said he was necessary, he was infinite, and that he demanded blood. And when we asked who it was, when the dwarven necromancer attempted to speak the name of the one who sent them, he immediately began coughing and choking and very suddenly and very mysteriously died. It was a very intense moment, very exciting, and of course for this page I had to draw the skeletal dragon. It's the main subject of the scene. As cool as this moment was, I wish I was better at taking notes during combat sequences. I just get so distracted. There are too many things to worry about. I am far too busy planning my next move, and I'm actually relying quite a bit more than I would like to on my own memory for these pages, because boy howdy are my actual notes just a bunch of disjointed bullet points like hug Roland is biscuit, turn off the pillars. And also I just wrote the name Scuggy, which I could be wrong, but I think this is either one of the necromancers or possibly one of the werewolves upstairs. It's just so hard to tell from what's written down. But after I was done drawing the skeleton dragon, I tested out the looks of the different layers together, and I still felt like things were a little unbalanced. So I turned my mistake from the start of the page into a happy little accident of symmetry for this final page. So I cut out my dragon and a little border so that I could glue some black construction paper behind it. This would make my dragon stand out a little more and also give a dark balance to the pages once they're all open together. I will confess I did a much worse job this time around. I am not sure why I was struggling so much. You know, sometimes it's a good muscle, fine motor movement day, and sometimes it's bad. And I guess this day was just a bad muscle movement day. I don't know. And because of that, I accidentally tore my dragon's foot off. But it's fine. Nothing a little glue can't fix anyways. It's fine. Everything is fine. But after fixing the dragon's foot and writing a little bit of the story in, we are finished with that page and it is time for the reveal. Down, 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 Fing's party enters the depths of Caer Themar with the hopes that they will find their next clue to the missing elven princess. Following flashing purple lights and the faint sound of chanting, the group finds a horrendous sight, a large group of evil cultists preparing a ritual. Carefully, the party made their way around the room, trying not to attract the attention of the enemy, while hoping to weaken and potentially deactivate the ritual by pouring holy water over the desecrated stones of the obelisks. The ritual began to take a turn as the dwarven necromancers began to shout blood for the blood god and began to throw themselves into the pit. Power began to swell, arcing towards the head cultists as well as a pile of large bones in the room. Battle ensued. The party was caught. Well, most of them anyways. Roland somehow miraculously stayed out of sight, and a strange pig that looked suspiciously a lot like Roland had joined them instead. Even so, the group was grateful for the new ally and they began to work to disrupt the ritual. It was a long, hard-fought battle, and despite their greatest efforts and the damage they had done to the obelisks beforehand, it was too late. Power seeped into the bones of the skeleton dragon. The magic was taking hold, but the party continued to fight, and just when they thought all was lost, a voice spoke to them, encouraging, warm, begging them to press onward to find strength and power, and as if they had all found a secret reserve of strength, power deep within themselves, they continued to fight fiercely, successfully taking down the dragon, and successfully learning more about these evil necromancers. And lastly, on the other side of the room, they found a cage with two weak figures cowering together inside of it. A bruised and severely injured dwarven man, as well as a clearly exhausted, thin elven woman. I I've been specifically looking for ways to make the journal a little more interactive and have a little more dimension. I love the stamps and stickers and colors that I normally do. I love painting the little pictures. Of course, I plan to keep up with that, but I just wanted some interesting shapes and things about the pages as well. But for this very small section, sort of closing up the battles within Caer Themar, I am so pleased, just overjoyed. I know it's not a lot of color, but I think it looks nice and different from the rest of the book in a good way. But on that note, as always, thank you so much for watching my videos, commenting, liking, subscribing. Of course, it means so much to me. It is your support that makes this video worth accidentally ripping my book spine open for, which hopefully destroying this book unintentionally doesn't become a trend. I really would not like to have to rebind this book, so hopefully it stays together at least long enough until I finish all the pages on the inside, and then I'll spend some time worrying about the outside, hopefully. But as always, who knows? Not me.